There are those who speak and those who listen. But every so often, someone shows up who does both with uncommon purpose and an open notebook in hand. Nicole Banks is a power connector, a woman whose network doesn't just span industries, it sparks movements. For more than 2 decades, she's solved problems others run from, built what others said couldn't be done, and highlighted the wisdom of giants, one page at a time. This is Nicole's Business Notebook, a curated circle of brilliance, a behind-the-scenes pass to the strategies, stories, and secrets shared by the experts she calls friends. It's not just a show, it's a blueprint for those bold enough to build. So settle in, because the notebook is open.
Hi, it's Nicole Banks with Nicole's Business Notebook, and we are sharing the inspiring stories of entrepreneurs from across the greater Phoenix Valley and beyond so that we can do better business together. Our goal is to share the unique and interesting stories of entrepreneurs so you can get to know a little bit more about them, what their motivations are, who they help, and hopefully get inspired to work with them or to be an entrepreneur yourself. Today we have Peggy Christian here. She is a woman's life coach and does an amazing experience. So I'd love to have Peggy introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Peggy, and I actually have come to be a coach from a very unlikely path. Mm-hmm. So originally I was a dentist, so I'm actually Dr. Peggy Christian.
Oh, doctor.
Yeah, and so I practiced dentistry for about 9 years, and during that time frame, I didn't love it. And so I figured out what it is that I'd love to do, and it had to do with science. And so then I went into the pharmaceutical industry for a little while, and eventually got back into dentistry, running clinical trials for in dental products.
Amazing.
And one of the things about being in pharma medical device, is especially if you're in early stage, most of the time stuff doesn't work. And so there was a lot of layoffs, and I often worked for really small companies, and so they would run out of money. Or if they had a product that was successful, they would get bought up, and then you were no longer needed. So that got me to the life coaching part because I figured out what was the thread between all of those things that I did. And what it is even as a dentist, I feel like I empowered people. I empowered them to take care of their health. I empowered them to feel confident about how they're caring for themselves. I empowered them to feel comfortable with their smile. And so, it really is the culmination of everything that I've done. And so I focus primarily on women because women and men in their coaching needs are often quite different. It has to do with the way that we're brought up. It has to do with the things that we learn along the way. And I love working with women.
That's amazing.
So that's what I do.
That's great. So, obviously, dentistry, pharma, medical trials, all of that is a male-dominated field mostly. So how was, kind of going from that and working in a male, sort of oriented industry and then actually I want to be a women's coach. I mean, that's a pretty big shift. So can you explain kind of what inspired you to go from here to there?
Yeah, and you know what? I didn't pay attention to it being a male-dominated, really, to tell you the truth. By the time I got into dentistry, about half of the class was females. Wow. And I just had the opportunity in November to hear the story of a woman who graduated just 4 years earlier than I started dental school, and she was ostracized in dental school. There were people that would make remarks like, you shouldn't be here, you're taking a job away from a man. And the instructors could be really, really nasty, but I didn't experience that in my career. And I never really thought of it, in the dentistry part. But then when I was in the research part, and I got the opportunity to work with the women who were very instrumental, especially in periodontics and oral surgery, and to see that they were the trailblazers. Yeah. And there was a small group of them. And and it was really, I really got to appreciate what they had done. Yeah. And so, I think the reason, though, that I'm so interested in women is because of that difference between women and men in the way that we're conditioned. And so many of us, we can be stopped by feeling not enough. Many of us can be stopped because we have shame. Many of us can be stopped because we want to feel that we have to do everything on our own. And yeah.
Stop talking about me, Peggy.
Yes, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Right. And some of it, the conditioning is to put other people ahead of yourself. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times a woman wants to make a change, but she doesn't know how because it's not something she ever practiced.
Right. Yeah, no, I can see the conditioning, the upbringing, societal pressures and expectations. It is definitely it's a different type of thing, to be a woman, in a male dominated field or just, in, entrepreneurship, as it is, it's a lot different. And, coming from our experiences and our upbringing and that whole bit, it's its own unique set of challenges. So, how do you work with women? Like, if a potential client were to come up to you, Peggy, I need help,
right.
Kind of how does your process start?
The first thing I do is most of the women that I'm working with is they have actually quite great lives from the outside. We're very successful, and yet we may feel empty on the inside. And so part of it, and there may, like anything in life, many of us, we have areas of our life that are wonderful. We wouldn't want to make any changes. But then there's one or two areas that we keep saying, oh, I want to do this. I want to change this. I want to change this. And yet at the end of the year, you're like, oh my God, I didn't do that again. And then it goes back on the list for the new year. And then, and that starts then the shame spiral.
Right.
And the thing that I think is, in women in particular, one thing is there's studies that show, and you may have heard this statistic before, where a man will apply for a job if he has 50% of the qualifications that the job requires, where a woman, oftentimes, it will be 80 or greater. Mm-hmm. And also, not that many people in the C-suites and things like that, so they didn't have a lot of mentorship, and they're constantly being ignored.
Right.
Their ideas and things like that. And you and I talked about this. I started looking up last week what are some of the hidden figures in science and things like that. And the DNA molecule that everybody knows with the double helix. Well, there was a woman, her work, if she hadn't done her research, then nobody else would have gotten any further. Right. But we never hear about those things, right? Or somebody else steals their work to get published and things like that. And today I just saw something on social media where was a physician back in Dickens' time, and she was just so honored of everything to do it. But she was dressed up as a man. Mm-hmm. And then when she died, there was this big scandal because they didn't want to bury her. She wanted to be buried in this place of esteem, and then they saw that she was a woman, and they wouldn't do it.
Wow.
Yeah. So actually, women have been doing these miraculous things for many, many years, but they're being held down. And if I can, then that's the reason why the International Day of the Woman is so important, because in the United States, yes, we have gender differences, and we have where the women and girls do not have the same opportunities oftentimes. But in the rest of the world too, it's very endemic. And the three countries where it's the worst, where women are not safe, women and girls are not safe, or they're held back from education, or they're not. There's a lot of sexual violence against them. Yeah. Are Afghanistan, the Congo, and oh my gosh, what was the third one? I can't remember, but it will come back.
We'll add it to the comments.
Yes. I just read it earlier today, but Yeah, and so sometimes we, in the United States, we might feel like we're distanced from it. But the importance of it is to remember that there are people, even in our country, that don't have the same opportunities that we do, that don't have the same safety that we do. And it really, really is. You know, here we have pay disparities. We have poverty disparities. We have healthcare disparities. And recently, you know, there's reproductive right disparities that are happening. And I find that so hard to believe.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I started my career, you know, back in the day, and, you know, the ad said looking for somebody who's good with numbers and good with people. And I showed up and it was an Amco transmission shop. I'm like, I'm a girl, first off.
Right.
Before I even got out of the car, I was like, I'm like, I know jack about cars. I'm not a car gal, you know, anything like that. You know, is this the right place for me? You know, I mean, back in those days, you know, people are like, you're going to find a job, you're going to work there for 40 years, you're going to retire with a pension, you know, and obviously that's not how today's world works,
Right.
you know, but back when I started my career, you know, going in and yeah, I'm 18 years old. I don't know anything about cars, but I'm your manager and I need you to have this done by 5. The learning curve and, you know, that whole bit was, I mean, dang near straight up, you know, with me
Yeah.
trying to figure those things out. And, you know, I mean, yes, I was successful and I was able to build this career and the whole thing, but it wasn't easy.
Right.
And I think that, you know, for me, you know, I came at it, you know, as an outsider. I didn't know anything about cars. So I didn't have any bad habits. I didn't have any good habits. So I just took this holistic view of like, okay, well, what's going on here? And, you know, in that, you know, I was able to create a problem solve and innovate and really kind of change how Amco did business.
Wow.
I was the first person to get salesperson of the year that was under 40 years old. So, you know, coming new guns, you know, the whole bit, you know, all that and trying to figure out how things were going to work and that whole thing, I made it work. But I was the first girl also to win the award. And everyone's just like, wait, who's this Nicole person? You know, you know, her husband's got to be the one that's, you know, doing all the work, you know, and I'm like, I'm 18 years old. I'm not married yet. Like, you know, any of those things. And so you kind of firsthand, you know, in that industry. And then, you know, I worked all the way up and essentially did kind of like Gordon Ramsay's kitchen nightmares, but I went into different shops.
Okay.
And so from like 18 to 25, I'm going in like, hi, I'm Nicole. I'm going to start telling you what to do. You need to change this. You need to change this. We're going to do this differently. And then here's your marketing material. We're completely scrapping what you've done. Your commercial sucks. And we're gonna do things better. Yeah. And they're like, who are you?
Well, I'm curious. Did you run against like snide remarks? Did you have that kind of thing and you just ignored it? How did you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, my dad's name, he's since passed away, but it was Nick. So my name was Nicole. I was essentially raised to be like a junior, you know, in the whole things. And so growing up, you know, the whole thing, like anything you can do, I can do better. But it wasn't that I could do it better, is that the expectation is if a man could do it, I could do it too. So I think being raised that way helped. But I mean, there was multiple Me Too moments and, you know, lines were crossed and asses were grabbed and, you know, all these different things happened throughout the years and a lot of pushback and a lot of, wait, you're 19 years old. I've been doing this for 40 years. Mm-hmm. You know, there's nothing that you're going to tell me that's going to help me run my business.
So that isn't even gender. That's age.
Yes. But in that, you know, it was, you know, what is a 19-year-old girl going to tell me, you know? And, you know, for me, you know, going through and, you know, working in different shops in different areas throughout the Southwest, it was a lot of the same problems. A lot of the same things kept happening no matter where I went. And it was, okay, you're young and you're a girl, you know, and you don't know how to drive a stick. At that point, I didn't. You know, you don't know how to do this, you don't know this, you don't know that. And I said, well, I just needed to learn how to run the business. I can sell ice to an Eskimo. I can sell the jobs. I can do this. You're not paying me to know how to take out a transmission, completely rebuild it, and put it back in. That's not my job. My job is to do the administrative tasks, which are girl tasks, you know, in the office and the whole bit, and then sell to the customers. And most people prefer to be sold to a woman, whether a man or a woman. you know, so I, you know, used what I had, you know, as opportunities available to me, but, you know, kind of on the flip side, you know, and to the point of the importance of International Women's Day, you know, I, you know, kind of have some 50s, you know, sort of stand by your man, Tammy Wynette, you know, sort of beliefs. And, you know, that in its own self is, you know, something to kind of relish. I want to be the entrepreneur, the power networker, and do all these amazing, great things, you know, and all of that. But, you know, I'm technically supposed to be home and cooking meals for the men and, you know, doing, you know, that whole thing. So it's kind of that internal struggle from where I was raised to kind of what I'm doing in life and the whole bit. So it's a big change. So, I mean, obviously in your, you know, experience and history and, you know, all of that, you know, what sort of moments have you experienced, you know, being dentist or in pharma, you know, did you have similar experiences?
Well, my grandma, when I said I was going to dental school, she goes, well, why don't you just be a hygienist? That's a good job for a woman. Yeah. But, you know, she was in her 90s, you know, and for her, that fit within her experience and her expectations. And to even work outside the home, you know, for her, that was like such a step up, right? Yeah. And like maybe, I guess it was funny. I worked in a large dental practice and I didn't have a male dental assistant, but my friend did. And they would always talk to him as though he was the dentist.
Oh, yep.
Yep. And then I would have some older gentlemen say, you're going to pull my tooth, you know?
Right.
Because, again, I was female and I'm small stature and stuff like that. And so, you know, you've experienced the difference between somebody being curious and somebody being putting you down.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think that's a big part of it. But, you know, it's so interesting that you were kind of talking about the value, you know, your kind of values. And I, too, had the big career, traveled all the time when I was in pharma. But I still did everything at home. I still wanted to do that because that's part of me of compassionate and empathetic, Peggy. Right?
Yep.
That's who I am. And maybe that's what made you such a great worker as well, because you're putting yourself in the other person's shoes, whether it's developing the processes within a business or in sales. And those skills are looking at a person as a person.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, exactly to that point, you know, for me, I think it's, you know, women have a different set of expectations than men do. And, you know, when it comes to the household burden and, you know, child rearing and all of those extras that we have to do, you know, I think, one, I don't think that it's always taken into consideration, you know, the fact that we're CEOs and we're doing all this amazing work in the whole bit, but we're still, you know, cleaning, you know, Timmy's snot when we get home and changing diapers and making dinner
night.
And, you know, all of those things. And I mean, obviously we are thankful for the awesome, amazing partners and husbands and, you know, all of that, you know, kind of share that burden. But, you know, historically and societally, I think it is definitely still a burden that's on us. And so, you know, we have to continually go. And so I think, you know, for, you know, what you're doing and helping women and inspiring them, you know, we put on a great front. And, you know, a great mask or whatever word that you want to say. But, you know, I do think that, you know, every woman has those one or two things that, you know, we'd love to change. So I think that's so monumental that you've, you know, said, hey, look, I want to find those one or two things and help.
Yeah.
So,
because it's keeping us from thriving. And then sometimes it actually chips away at our self-worth, right? So this is one distinction that I think is really important when we're talking about whether it's coaching or self-fulfillment, is there's a big difference between self-esteem and self-worth. So self-esteem can be gathered by accomplishing things. So
great at that.
Yeah, right? And so, but you may have run across brilliant people, and especially women, and they don't even know the value of what they do. They don't, they can't accept it. And so that's the self-worth thing.
Right.
And so self-worth can only be derived internally. And that's where a lot of the one or two things that that women have, men have, is we have this belief that we pick up probably before we're 7, when we don't have language or emotional skills, and somebody that we valued said something to us, and it could have been totally innocent.
In passing, just,
Exactly. We didn't bring any of the context in, or it could have been on purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. But then when it's on purpose, we often can name it. And so when we can name it, I believe it's not a hidden belief. Well, it's not a hidden belief, but it's, if you're holding on to that belief, it's because it's gaining you something. But the ones that are hidden from us, the ones that are outside of our consciousness, those are the ones where we have, in the way that I do my coaching, is we determine what is your belief about what's possible, who other people are, and what your life could be. So it's kind of like I am not able to have money. I am not able to have a relationship where I'm met on all aspects. And that we don't even know where that came from. We don't even know it exists. And so what we do is we uncover it. And the interesting thing is that doesn't take that long to find out what false belief system you had, and you can replace that with I am worthy of having everything that I want. But what happens is, let's say you adopted that thought process when you were 6. Well, all the rest of your life, when you had the opportunity to break through and understand, you didn't do it because it wasn't possible for you, so why bother?
Right.
So that's what we do. We develop the skills. That's why coaching isn't like 2 or 3 times generally. Generally, it might be a 3-month thing, because then you go out and you learn which skills you don't have, and you practice in the safety of accountability and somebody else there being with you, allowing you to gain the skills that you didn't have all the way along.
Yeah, no, I think that's, exactly right. I think, women are so, and obviously men too, but, with the focus here today being on women, I think, they're so multidimensional. And I think there's, so many stresses that, you're thinking about, coming from all directions, when it comes to our partners and our loved ones, our families, our friends and their expectations. And then, all of the social interactions that we have, the neighbors and, all of those things, all the way up to, professionally, and kind of the plethora of issues and problems that can come, at women, professionally, whether it has anything to do with them being a woman or not. I think it's a lot to deal with all at once. And so, finding those 1 or 2 things, of everything that they have put together, those 1, 2, 3 things, that they could help to develop, I think is a really inspiring way to coach and to find that. So can you share kind of a success story that you've had with one of your clients, and kind of the before and after?
Yeah, one of the people that I worked with, she came in and she wanted to write a book. So she wrote all the time as a lawyer. But this was a book about a case that she was involved with in the case of extenuating circumstances and somebody being wrongfully convicted of a crime. And it had to do, it was gender-based, and it was also had to do with LGBTQ type of things too. And the thing was that she had this idea that she could not talk about other people's experiences.
Interesting.
Right? Because if you didn't live it, then how can you have that story?
Right.
Right. And so when we uncovered that belief, then she was able to separate it out as, this is not me having to expose them. It's me being able to honor them. And instead of putting somebody in harm, I'm actually raising them up. So that could have even come from, girls don't talk about other people. Don't be that nasty girl.
Don't gossip.
Yes, exactly, right? Simple things like that can hold us back.
Yeah.
And then she actually got the book published.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, it's funny. So one of the distinctions too between like therapy and coaching is therapy kind of looks backwards and assumes that there's something wrong, whereas coaching looks forward and assumes that you have everything that you need within you in order to reach whatever goal it is that you want.
I love that. I think that's a really, really great way to put it. Is there a tip, a trick, a thought, a nugget that you can give with your experience and helping women that you think that they could benefit from?
Well, what I would say is, if there's something that's bothering you about your opportunities, your lives, there's a lot of politics stuff going on now, and a lot of women feel scared. They feel scared if it's not for themselves, but for their children and their grandchildren, and having some of the rights that they had taken away. And today in the news, it was about, looking into the FDA and having birth control being regulated in a way that it hadn't been before. And it's just something that just seems so crazy to me. But if this is something that's bothering you, find local people, like grassroots stuff. It's the only way that anything really gets done. And so become involved. Do what you can. It's so surprising what can happen when you're doing something in the grassroots level. And plus, that's something where you can do it. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think community is incredibly important. And, things have been, especially lately, I think, so polarizing and so controversial. And I think that, everybody is kind of stepping on eggshells. But, to the point that you made earlier, I think there's so much more that we have in common than we don't. Right. And focusing on those, things that we have in common. And if we want things changed, then to find other like-minded people, like-minded women, like-minded, advocates and supporters to help change what you want to do. The power of community is incredibly powerful. I am a power networker. I bring people together. Exactly. It's all about kind of who I know and what I can leverage, for collaboration and support and, my business network and personal network. And I think, kind of if I were to give that same sort of advice, it'd be find your tribe, find your people, find your community, and give a little bit of grace.
Yes, thank you. That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Peggy, it was so great to have you on today and to share your incredible experience and history. I love your passion that you have for working with women, and, thinking about, my own life, those one or two things, changing those and working on those. I could only imagine the impact that what you're doing is able to show on the women that you work with. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
For inviting me. Yeah. This has been a wonderful experience. Thank you, Nicole.
Perfect. So again, it's Nicole Banks with Nicole's Business Network Notebook, and we are really trying to share the inspiring stories of entrepreneurs, coaches, and businesses throughout the greater Phoenix Valley and beyond. We are looking and actively finding, those experts that we can do so that we can kind of fill the educational void that there is, and looking for subject matter experts like Peggy to share her expertise and her wisdom. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Nicole's Business Notebook. Subscribe and follow for more tips, insider secrets, and hard-earned wisdom so that we can all do better business together. See you next time.